And this is how we physically measure it in the field. We just go out, look at our section control, and find the deepest parts. We go and measure with our, usually if we're doing a weight engaging, we'd have a rod or some method that we can physically just measure this actual height. So the deepest point of the control is what we're looking for, the deepest point across the section. That's when the river's going to stop flowing, and then we can relate this depth off our staff reading to give us our offset.
Just even is
Yep.
Do practically, I mean, when we go through the exercise, we do a little bit of trial and error. Is that,
We do.
you know, is that kind of how you do it, or are you about to say that, or are you?
Yeah, about to say
okay,
that, Mike.
sorry.
Well anticipated here. So for the different control types, there is a different way of using this offset. So for a section control, it's quite easily because we can find this point of zero flow by, as I say, by going out and physically measuring it like this. And so that's our first approximation of this offset. But often it does take fine adjustment. So we are in there, as you'll see, we do adjust it by tweaking this up and down. Here's an offset actually in the offset manager. So we can, it's a place to start, but we do have to adjust it because often we may not have picked the deepest place. We sort of, it's very hard at times to find where the deepest part of the control is. So for a section control, it's a great place to start. We may still tweak it. But if it's a channel control or overbank control, it's very hard to go and measure that offset. You obviously can't wade a large river. If you had a boat, if you're using ADCP or some way of measuring depth, you can go down to the control with the boat and establish it. But often we use it trial and error when it gets to a big river to establish this offset. Just as a little gotcha here, that it does have this get best scale offset. I think this comes from a USGS slide that they do not use this button, and I've used it too, and it really seems to be a waste of time. I don't know how it gets that value, but it never seems to help. So I'm just saying, don't use that. Don't be tempted to use that button. So yeah, just to go over this again, this is a section control here. So the height of water in the gauge pool on the gauge here is defined by the section control. The break is the obvious section control, the break in the surface. It's easily identified, and the point of zero flow is easily found. Larger rivers, the section control gets drowned out, or it may not even exist, and so it's very hard to establish this. But if you knew roughly where it was, you may be in a boat and you could measure the depth still. But there's no break in the water surface to indicate the section control. Here's another example of a big slow river. Really, it's again hard to. In this case, it probably isn't a section control. It's just a channel control. So the channel each side is defining the height or holding that river back, and that's really governed by the geometry, the shape of the channel, the slope, and then the roughness along the side. Those three things are really just holding the river and acting as a control at that point. And then when it goes over bank, you know, who knows what's going on. So floods are different again. So just to put it in a graphical sense, if we're measuring the range of river that we're measuring is, say, within this bracket here. So this is in a channel control situation. Here's the section control below, but it never gets down onto it. It's always acting in the channel control range. We would have a rating, a straight line rating, which is quite simple in log. And this is how it would look. This is a big river, up to 1,000 cumecs here. And this is just a straight channel control, no section control here. So it's a beautiful straight line. This rating, though it's been changed in 2016, it was actually established in 1974. So it's been very stable. A perfect example of a channel control. And that's it in arithmetic. That's log. And that's the site there. So you can see there, you can't see a section control, but you can obviously see where the channel is. So the channel's here. And then of course we have, like most rivers you may have, it's when they're in a low stage, they have the section control will be cutting in, and when they go to higher stage, the channel control will be cutting in. And so there's a transition between the two controls, and it tends to look like this in our log. So there's a change in slope on our rating curve. And this is how it look at it in the queries. So we have that change of transition here is what's known as a breakpoint, which we won't be discussing today, but a breakpoint is where the rating will break into two separate sections. And you can see this is basically this site, the top end stays the same, but the lower end is changing a lot. It moves around a lot. So we at this point here, we don't change it. At this point here, it moves around with different gaugings. So that's the section control and the channel control cutting in, as we saw there. And that's an arithmetic, log, arithmetic. And this is the site here. Again, you can see the section control is across here. So this is changing every time there's a flood. It's going to move a lot. The channel control here is not changing. And there's possibly a little bit of overbank happening here through this old channel. But really so if you go back and look at this section control back here, and then it goes to channel control further up. And then lastly, you've got a site that covers the whole range. So it has a section control when it's low, channel control mid flows, and then in flood it goes to overbank control. Oops, sorry. So this one would have two control transitions. So it would look like this, the change of slope in a rating curve. And here's an example of one of our sites here, which has, you can see the section control here goes to channel control and then overbank as it just spreads wide across the fields. And this is this rating here. In this case, this photo, the section control is drowned out, but you can see the channel control here, and then it floods over the banks here. So just to sum that up, the three different channel, it's very stylized. Of course, there's always combinations that are different than this, but generally they fall into these categories of channel control. This is what it looks like in arithmetic, log. When you've got both controls in action here, you'll have a slight more bend and transition here in the arithmetic and the slope and log, and the three different controls over the floodplain. You can see it bends right back when it goes over the floodplain here, and looks like this in log. So development of rating curve, the basics. We need to go out and measure flows, as you probably know. We need to go and measure by weighting and by boats or cableways or whatever method we have. We need to establish these ratings using good measurements. And this is how it looks. We've got weighting ones at the lower end, of course. We use boats higher up, and when it's very high and we can't gauge, we use indirect discharge measurements by surveying cross sections and slope area methods. And we establish a rating, or the gauging measurements anyway, that will create our rating. And then we look at our offsets and breakpoints, and some are complicated. That's what we saw before. That's what it looks like in Aquarius, and that's how it relates to the real world. Here's another example of one of our stations too, and how important a cross section is at this site, showing where the breakpoint comes in at the section controls here. This is a river here, so it's a very long, wide river under section control until it goes into flood, and then it hits the banks and it's in the channel control. That's about it for the basics, Mike. After that, we get a bit more advanced stuff, which we can do another time, but at least it gives you a little bit of a background.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. I'll just cancel out so my machine doesn't play while it sounds to you all afternoon. So hopefully that was a useful sort of look at what we've been doing from I guess a more real world perspective, in terms of, we've been talking about a lot of numbers and gaugings and things like this, and so hopefully you saw from the photos and Evan's interpretation of them, just kind of some of the real world aspects of this. For those that aren't entirely familiar with this, that one of the things that we will be doing is, when we talk about ratings, at any point in time, we build one of these curves which describes the conditions that apply for a period of time. And as you can see from a lot of those pictures, particularly in New Zealand, the conditions can change in terms of those channels and things and move. And that was what Evan was talking about in stability. And so what happens is if things change because an event goes through, we have to build a new curve. So this process we're about to go through in terms of building rating curves is not generally in the end. Today we'll only do one example, but in the end, you build a curve that applies for a period of time, and then conditions change and you have to build a new curve to describe the new conditions. It's still the same process. You still use the gaugings and the information you've got to build the new one, but part of the process of hydrologists is to continue to maintain this relationship as it changes. And Evan's point, the more stable a site is, the less often you have to change it. But we've got, in New Zealand, we've got some sites that I think we've had 150 to 200 different ratings over the lifetime of the site. So our system will have 150 to 200 sitting in under the site. I think that's probably enough for us to start looking at, okay, how does the tool let us do what Evan's just been talking about? So I will start, and again, just so everybody is where we're at, those that are following along in the manual, we are starting lesson 6. You are seeing my screen? Seeing my screen?
Yep. Yes, sir.
So we're at lesson 6. So we're getting this, and this is all about building this relationship between stage and discharge. So if we start with lesson 1 is really just opening the tool, and let's have a bit of a look at what it's got in it, because it's quite a complicated tool. So to access the tool, we log in and you go to your site as we normally do. We're having a look at our time series view. And what we have is, if we hover over the different types, this particular item is called a rating model. And it's our stage discharge log method rating. So this is a rating model, and we're going to work on that. So what I will do is, because we're going to do, it can show us the level information as part of using this tool. What we need to do in opening this tool is we also need to hook up the level record that is related to this tool. So what we do is, when we open the rating tool, we will click the stage.working data set as well as the rating, and then we open the rating editor. Probably something I should note right now for those that are, there are actually 2 rating editors. So there is this one that's called Beta, and there is the one that we're going to use to demonstrate the tool. This is part of the evolution of Aquatics, similar to the file import tools that we looked at. The tool we're about to open is part of the client tools that got installed onto your machine and open as a typical Windows application that we are all sort of used to. They are trying to move away from that architecture. Well, they are moving away from the architecture of Aquarius so that you don't have to install client tools. That's their vision. You'll just run the app out of your browser. So this is where Aquarius are investing a lot of time on their new rating tool. It is not sufficiently fleshed out yet really to be used. It's being included for people to have a look at and to place feedback on terms of how it matches their business processes. NIWA is working with a group of 3 organizations, NIWA, USGS, and what's it called? BSC, the Canadian hydrological team. And starting early next year, we are going to get quite active in evaluating this new version and feeding back and going into a cycle of making sure it does what we want. Aquatics view is within about a year from here, maybe. It will be at the point where most people should be using this tool and they will get rid of the current rating tool, but we're not there yet. And so today we'll be using the existing tool that the New Zealand team use at the moment. So we've selected these 2 data sets and we open the tool. When we open the tool, we get this application that looks like this. And it is quite a complicated screen. And so it does take a wee bit of explaining to work our way through it. So just in terms of general use, the feature that I most valued is you can lay this out how you like. We can drag that layout out and move that off onto my second screen. We can resize things and we can be quite clever, and then we potentially can get ourselves in a mess because it doesn't quite look like we wanted it to anymore. The thing to remember is if you have changed things to a point where it's all got a bit messed up, there is this view default layout and it'll take you back to the original view and put everything back. So it's great to explore with dragging and pulling out and resizing everything. It's great to know that if you end up doing something you didn't want, you can go back and just hit that default layout and get back to where you were. So that's one of the key features to know. So knowing that, feel free to resize and look at these different tabs. What happens is this view here, this tab over here on the left, is sort of the rating summary tab. And what it does is it has, if we have more than one rating, and we'll see because we do load a couple through these exercises, you'll see each rating appears as a tab along here as we get more than one. The thing that is, I guess, for NIWA people, when we moved away from our old tool called Tidyda, there was the way ratings were done here were slightly different from how they were done in Tidyda, in that you can have a rating over here which defines its shape and the rules of it. Then, as part of the definition over here, there is a rating period manager. So for a rating to be applied, you must create one of these. You must say, for this period of time, this rating applies. And then if there's a different one for a different period of time, you do that. So what that means is you can define a rating and have it in this tool and shown and actually never use it. Now, you probably wouldn't want to do that, but it is possible. Just because you've defined the rating doesn't mean it's being used. It is, in the end, what's being used is defined by looking up this rating period manager, and we will get to that. But the rating period manager says from this date to this date, you use this rating, and then from this date to this date, you use a different rating. And that's how you deal with the changing ratings over time. But in our old tool, the rating itself had a beginning and an end. They were the same thing. It is possible here in Aquarius that you could define a rating and apply it for one period, move to a different rating for a different period, and then in a third period, come back and say, actually, we're back to the first rating. And so you wouldn't have to define it twice, you just refer to it. And that, I guess that where that might be useful is if you have a site, say, that is pretty standard, but in a certain season, it gets vegetation on the side. And so you need a new rating during the period while the vegetation applies. But then when conditions change and the vegetation all gets cleared out, you're back to the original ratings. That might be a situation where the same rating might be applied for multiple periods. In general, in New Zealand, a rating is used for one period of time and then it's not used again. It'll be a different rating from then on. So we don't tend to come back and use the same rating multiple times, but the tool does support it. One of the key elements that you can see in the tool in terms of doing a stage discharge rating is our gauging information, which is the field measurements the team went out where we measured the stage and discharge. This view here, which is the field visit table in this view over here, and we'll just grow it a bit, is the list of all the field visits that we have in the system. So when we think about that, what does that mean? If we go back to our view, we've been looking at this view here where we've been slowly adding field visits in the last couple of days. We did this yesterday where we were adding all these field visits. You'll see that each of those is one of the rows in this view here. And in actual fact, if you double click one of these, it takes you to the details of that one. So if you want to look up further information, we'll look at the pictures, you can double click on the gauging in that part of the tool and in this tool, and it will move you across. There are quite a few fields in here as you expand it out, which of this information is all drawn out of what we have entered in the field visit side of the tool. Some of these other fields, which is some of the error calculations, start to get filled in when we actually start drawing our rating. So at the moment, because we haven't actually drawn a rating, we just have the gauging points, those values aren't filled in. As we build in the rating, as we start building it, we will get rows in here, which are the values for the rating, our description, but they are basically the points, and then we can see the formulas between those points, and we'll go through that. Like time series, once we've built a rating, we can add a grade, and we can add multiple grades. So for different periods of the rating, we could give it different grades. So typically that would mean probably at the high end of the rating, we would probably give it a grade that's lower because there's probably more uncertainty in it. In the middle, we're probably more confident. We're likely to have more gaugings, that sort of thing. So we'll be more confident and likely to grade it higher. And then depending on the site, again, some of the low flows, the uncertainties might start getting up again because it's just hard to measure at very low flows, or we're not there often enough to do it. So again, maybe the grades start coming down. It's your choice, but what you can do, and we will do it in an exercise, is we can grade different parts of the rating with different grades. This view down here is a similar view to this one, but is where we tend to do most of our work when we're building the rating in terms of looking at it. This presents, there is no rating yet, this is just the gaugings, but it presents the view in two different ways. In this view, you can see the scale is, which way around is it? In rating zoom 1, the scale is a logarithmic scale. So stage is logarithmic and so is flow. In the rating 2, zoom 2, it is in linear space. So 2, 4, 6, 8. The scales are linear. One of the key things that Evan was talking to us about is that when we get the offsets right and we're in one of the control sections, when we've got this right, the rating, so what we draw as a rating, should plot as a straight line, not a flat line, but as a straight line, if we get the offset rights and all of that. So you'll see that as we're going through, but that's why we often like to be in log space. But sometimes it's also useful to see it in linear space, but a lot of our development is done based on the log space view of the rating. This tab down here just gives us an ability to have a quick overview of the stage record that we're looking at and how the gaugings fit along the way. So sometimes it's useful to refer to that as we're building the rating. The shift diagram over here we will use quite a bit. What it does is it shows when we get it going. It doesn't show anything at the moment, but when we're using it, it will show gaugings and it will show you the error percentage of each gauging of the rating we are drawing. So a big part of what we are trying to do in the end is minimize the error that's on each of the gaugings relative to the rating. And we'll see that when we do a trial and error bit of the rating. We'll see how we tweak things and look at this chart to work out, is the offset that we're putting in improving the overall rating in terms of these gaugings being and not having too much error, or is it making it worse? And that's part of what we look at as we move around. I'll just pause there for now because we're about to start a real exercise, but is there any questions about that layout at all, just in looking at it? Good old New Zealand icon, this one over here. We've got Dolly the sheep. Do you remember, anybody old enough to remember Dolly the sheep, one of the first animals that was ever cloned? So aquatics have put in a cloning. The cloning icon is a sheep, if you're wondering what that one is. So that is take an existing rating and clone it and create it again so that we can modify it for a new one, which is quite common how our guys will start the new rating. They'll start with the old one, clone it, and then modify it to reflect the new information. Any immediate questions, or we can get into loading a first rating? Should we keep moving on? So what we're going to do here is first real attempt at a rating is possibly again a useful way to bring in existing ratings from an old system. If you want to bring one in manually, basically what we're going to do here is we are going to bring in a rating that is a series of points in a CSV file. If we look at the file, this is the format of what we are looking at loading. So if you want to look at the file, we're in lesson 6. And we're going to load this rating curve metric. If we look at it in an editor, if it shows on the right screen, it is essentially just the list of points. So if you've got a system that's got some ratings in and you can get the rating points out, it is possible to load that in as your first go at the rating. Now, let's go through the example. So we will try step 2, page 74 is our first real example. So it says the first thing we should try and do is if we want to put some metadata around the rating that we're creating, this one here, you can go to the setup menu and click on rating. And what they've suggested we do is we call this one CSV import. And one of the key things that we need to do is this tool is quite flexible. Normally, most of the examples we're going to do, the rating will be in log space. In hydrology, that's often what it is, but you can define a rating where it is linear. So it's just going to use, what this defines is when you put the points into the rating, what does the system do in terms of determining the formula for what the shape of the curve looks like between those 2 points? So by picking linear, what it's going to do is it's just going to, when we have 2 points in the rating, it's just going to put a linear line, a straight line between those 2 points. In our other examples, when we use logarithmic, which would be the more normal hydrology one, it'll put a logarithmic formula. It'll determine a logarithmic formula between those points. And when we come back to it, there's some rules about hydrology that mean we can, if we get the offsets right, we can expect that to be a flat line. But this first example, we're going to put in and say, for between the points, just use linear interpretation. That's what it's saying. And it's useful potentially to put in a comment. So then we apply. And what that's do is you'll see it renames it. Then what we can do is we can load. So that's sort of just defined it. Now we're going to load the data into it. So to load the data into it, we can go File, Import Data. We find the file, so that one that we just looked at. And then we get to set the options about how it is loaded and how it's described. So there's a little bit in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick with the defaults, which is just basically overwrite anything we have in this rating. So we go import. And it's going to load it. And there we see it. So we can see graphically, here's the rating. If we want to see the actual points, there are the points. So these are the points we saw in the file, and we loaded them. Here is the formula, and you can see it's a linear formula. It's pretty much y equals mx plus c for the formula. So we've loaded the points. The system has worked out what's the formula for this bit between these 2 points, and that's the formula for the period between these 2 points. So that's what the system has done for us by loading the points. And we told it we wanted linear, and that's what it's done. If we look at it, if we look at our views, we can see the rating just in normal. We can see it in the log space and in linear space. So things do look quite different in these two spaces, but that's okay for now. So we go, right, so we've got a rating in there, which describes how to move stage discharge. Let's save the output. Now, the way to save this in this system is if you want to save it and stay in the screen, you just go save to output ports. If you want to actually leave the screen, you can go save to output ports and exit. So in this case, we will go save. So it just said there was no rating period. So we go, great, we've produced a rating curve. Let's go have a look at our flow. So let's move back to our time series and we update things. And we're kind of a bit confused because when we look at our discharge, which we know should be produced by the rating, we still don't have any points. And this ties back to what I said, that for a rating to apply, you have to give it the rule that says, please use this rating for this period of time. Now, in this case, we're not actually going to use this particular rating we've produced, so we're not going to do that. But that's why, even though we created a rating, it actually didn't enable us to calculate any flow. We've defined it, but we haven't applied it. And that's how probably the real world will go for people developing ratings. They'll develop the ratings, work on them until they're happy with them. When they're happy with them, they'll actually put the rating period on them so that they're applied for when they should be applied. Okay. The next case, what we're going to do now, which is step 3 on page 75, is sometimes you already know the formula of your rating. And so in this case, we're just going to do an example where, say we knew the formula and we knew some values that the formula told us for the rating. We could load those in fairly easily and it'll create the rating for us from those points. So this, again, probably isn't the common way that my field teams tend to do things, but it's just showing you some of the methods that are available to you if you choose to use them. So we will go through this. And so in this example, they're basically saying this is the formula for the site. We happen to know this for the sake of this example, which means if we're in metric, that at a stage of 1.77 meters, the flow would be 3.646. And at a flow of 7.62 meters, sorry, a stage of 7.62 meters, the flow would be 1498.869 cubic meters. So we're effectively going to take those values and load them and see that the rating can be produced this way. So that's what this exercise is about. So the way we do this is we've already got one rating. We're not actually using it, but we have one defined. We create a new one. So we're going to create one from scratch. So we go File, New. What name do we want to give it? Let's call this one the equation rating. In this case, they have said we want this to be a logarithmic one, and we saw from the formula it was logarithmic, so it should be described as a logarithmic. And they have suggested we take a comment. So we put the comment in. I may as well talk about it now. I'm not sure if we come back to it later, but one of the things that you get to set as part of a rating is what to do if the stage value in your stage record is below the range you define in this rating. And generally you don't want that, because generally you would want your rating to cover all the stage values. The real world situation where you need to think about this is if you have a point of zero flow, but you actually have stages that can go below that, but there is no flow, then obviously a stage value is valid in the real world at that point, but there is no flow. So you would want the rating to give you 0. So if you had that example where you basically say it was a pool, so you're measuring at the bottom of a pool, but once the pool gets to a point that it's below the control, it stops flowing, but you know there's water in the pool still, but it's just not going to be flowing. So when you've got your sensor, it's still giving you a stage value. You would want, in that case, it's genuinely real, but there's no flow. So in that case, you'd say when we're below the bottom of the rating, make it 0, because it's just there is no flow. The other alternative is, if you actually think it shouldn't happen, is you could say, please make this an empty value. And what that will mean is, if you get a stage value that's below your rating, in the discharge record, it will just appear as a gap. So you get to say which is appropriate for your rating in terms of whether it's 0 or a gap. I guess my school of thought on that is, if you know there is the real world where the river can go below the point of 0 flow, then obviously 0 makes sense. Other than that, my general thought is often make it a gap, because in your review processes, you are likely to see the gap. And perhaps that's a trigger to say, hey, we need to come and look at our rating, because in our real world at the moment, the stage is going below what we think the rating says it should ever go below. And is that a sign that our stage is wrong, or we just haven't done the right rating? What is it? So you can use it as a trigger. Your choice how you do it. You can either get it to come out when it's below the rating as a 0 or a gap. Those are your two choices. So in this case, we're not too worried about it, so we'll just leave it as empty value. What we now see is, now you can see we've got 2 tabs for our ratings. So if we click on this one, then everything the rest of this is showing us the answers in terms of that rating. When we click on this one, all the other screens update. Now the field visits obviously stay the same, but the bits that are rating related change. So you can see here at the moment, the one we just added has nothing in the rating, whereas the one we loaded has all these points. So the context, basically the context of these screens is driven by which of the ratings you've got selected up here. In this case, we're building the rating manually. So we're actually going to build it by putting the answers into the rating table. So we're not going to draw lines on their graphs. We will do this in some subsequent exercises. But for this one, we're actually going to put the points in and see the formulas come out in the rating created this way. So what you can do if you want to do it this way is you go to the rating tab in this rating area. So this middle tab. And then in this case, we want to add 2 points. So we click insert below twice. And then we're going to put the values in. Now the values are those ones that I read out before. So for our example, we're saying from 1.77 meters, the discharge is 3.646 cubic meters per second. And up to the stage of 7.62 meters, the flow takes off to 1498.869 cubic meters. And there you can see this then shows us the rating that is expressing. And what we can see from that is, in a good rating, if we've described it well, the shape of the rating should be going through most of the gauging points, at least the gauging points that still apply, which as a hydraulogist, you'll pick ones that apply, because if the real world is changing, some of your gaugings may no longer apply because the channel conditions have changed. That's part of the skill of creating these ratings, is working out which gaugings still inform it. And in general, ones at the top end may apply for years, but depending on how how stable your system is. Some of these ones in the middle or potentially low flow, particularly in New Zealand, you know, with our gravel rivers, the low flow is changing a lot. So these gaugings may not be applicable for terribly long, and so you may not consider them after a while when producing the rating. But that's part of understanding your river, is understanding whether the gaugings that we have over the life, which ones should be used to produce the new rating. But you can see in this one that at the moment, this rating is not doing a great job of covering these gaugings. And this is where, I guess, in the example, we start coming back to when we saw Evan's chart, we had that nice picture of the point of zero flow and the importance of getting that offset correct to make the rating not only, well, the rating as a straight line in log space, but also going through your gaugings. And part of this is because basically this problem is because we're not plotting this, we haven't got our offset marked. So the way to fix that in this plot is if we come to our offset manager and we see, please change your plot as well. Well, let's click the offset. Let's plot to that offset. And in this case, we happen to know what answer we want to put in. So we put 4.5. Did I not quite get that right? Offset pair must be less. I'm putting in the wrong value. Following the rule, 4.5 was, and that was giving me an error. You just couldn't see it. Sorry. So I'll show you what was happening. Is over here on my other screen. I can't drag it across. I was getting an error message popping up saying you can't put 4.5 in. And 4.5 is the answer in feet. In the linear one, which in the metric one, which we're doing, the offset according to the formula is 1.37. So when we do that and plot, you can update the plots, we'll see that things stink. Now, interestingly, if you start using this tool and you start going, hang on, we've now lost a whole lot of things, you need to refresh the screens using this auto scaling. So when things start looking like this, if you auto scale again, it will replot things to the correct and make things look correct. And so now, because we've got the offset set, you'll see that this actually is not a bad, theoretically at least, you know, representation. It's the rating that we've described is doing a pretty good job of going through the gaugings. If you want to know more about this point of zero flow, that chart that Evan showed you. So again, let's head to the back in our normal time series product. If we go to the help, is it here? I think it's here. You got to spell right or it won't find it for you. So that chart that Evan showed you is actually a reference out of the help menus from Aquarius. So if you want to relook at that and restudy it, there is material here in the help from Aquarius. Another really good place to go is, we talked about the support portal that Aquatics give you access to. There's material in there. Another place, USGS have quite a lot of material about rating preparation and various things around that. So it is another place to go and have a look. There is a real art, and I don't produce ratings in my role. Evan, who you saw on the video, does. There is a real art to doing ratings. There is a lot that people consider in looking at these ratings, particularly when they get a bit complicated. So there is help material there, and this, if you want to relook at what we were talking about, and that offset that we talked about here, this 1.37, effectively in our examples, we're saying the distance for where we measure zero to where the point of zero flow was in that example was 1.37 meters. So That was the point above our bottom. That's effectively what that number that we just put in is representing. And what that means, if we get that right, is that then the levels that we plot here against discharge should plot in straight line in log space for that control. If we look at it, this is the formula that it's produced for this rating, which I guess is just to note. So we put the points in, and then it generates the formula. And that is quite useful. And we'll come back to it again in one of the examples, I think, is as a hydrologist who has an understanding of the shape of the channel, they actually should know that based on shapes of channels, there are particular values that this exponent, that 2.1 bit of the formula, there is a range of values that are likely to be true in the real world based on the understanding of your site. And so using this information, you can look at the sort of numbers you're seeing and start making sense of is the rating that I'm producing and the exponents that describe it, do they make sense in the real world? So it's one of those, with the tool, you can kind of check on things to see that, okay, this rating that we've drawn looks all right on the screen. When we look at the formula, the exponents are the sort of numbers that we would expect for this kind of rating. And again, the actual knowledge of, you know, the channel types and what are the expected exponents, I'm not particularly familiar with, but I know it's true, and there is material on that. If someone is interested and wants to know that, I could certainly contact, if it's not on the help manual itself, contact me, and I could get Evan to give you some references as to where that material is. Okay, we're up to the next one is step 4. So this is where I think this is the one where we first attempt to really draw a rating rather than putting it in with points. We're going to use the gaugings to help us draw the rating. So this is probably the most common hydrological method that our teams would use in producing the ratings, where we're going to use the gauging evidence to help us do the shift to produce the curve and check that it's working correctly. So page 4, step 4 on page 78. So first step of that is let's create a new rating curve. In this case, let's call it 001 because we got rid of it. We do want it to be logarithmic, so make sure you pick logarithmic. Put in a comment. First rating for arid river gauge. And at this stage, we'll leave that at empty value. So what that's going to do is it's going to put a new tab up there for us. And when we look at the rating, we can see there's no rating actually defined. There's no points, no formulas, anything yet. As a standard setup for this rating, we do want it to plot to the offset. So let's set it to tell it to do that, even though at the moment we don't know what that offset is. But we're telling it we do want it to plot it that way. So in the offset manager, we click that we have one offset. We'll leave it at 0 at the moment. But then we say, please plot to that offset. And that adjusts these views over here to plot them relative to whatever offset we put in. So at the moment, you see this one is starting at 0, and you will see as we start putting in offsets, then these scales start using that as the offset. So in this case, because we're going to use this as a real one, a real rating that we're going to actually use to produce a discharge, as I've been talking about it, for this to occur, we will need to give it a rating period manager. So now when we look, we will do that. And if we look here, so sorry for those that didn't see me, I went to the rating period manager, which is this tab over here, not the shift manager, not the offset manager now. We're looking at the rating period manager. And we can see the 3 ratings we've defined are listed, but none of them have a date, which is why literally at the moment there is no discharge. So we want to get some discharge for this one we're about to build, which is 001. So to set some dates for that, you pick the one you want to set dates for and you double click it. We know that we started the site from our examples, if we remember all the gaugings that we did, that we want to set there to be flow from the start of the record, which we're saying is the 7th of August, which is probably familiar from our gaugings and our setups, at 10 a.m. And we put in a remark. Now, at this stage, we are not putting an end date on it. So what that will mean is that this will apply for all of the record until we close it off. So we would just, in this case now, we just go apply and we'll see there is a start date. If we have a new one that comes in the future, we would add, there'll be another rating here, and we would put an end date on the first one and a start date on the second one. One of the features that NIWA had to get Aquatics to add to this tool that didn't exist until we came on board as a user is the concept of, I think their term is blended ratings. So the way this rating tool was built for USGS, and USGS do ratings a little bit differently from us. They use a concept that NIWA doesn't use at all, which is these shifts. And what a shift does is you define a rating, and then they use shifts to describe a variant on a portion of that rating for a period of time. They use shifts to reflect when a rating has changed and they don't know entirely how to describe the entire change. They use shifts to describe the bit of the change that they know about and how that is changing until they are confident that they know the entire change of shape, and then they produce a new rating. So they used shifts for a while, and then when they're finally ready, they put in a rating with a new start date. What that means is for them, don't worry too much about the shifts, is their definition of a rating period is always in this table. There is a start date and an end date. The next one starts exactly at the end date of the previous one, because sort of their transition period is described through these shifts. What NIWA does is we don't do shifts at all. What we do is we always put in completely new ratings, but what we do to stop there being steps in the data is we use the blending. So what we do is we will have a period of overlap. So the end date of the rating that's finishing overlaps a little bit with the start date of the rating that we're bringing in. And over that period, the system prorates the flow values that it comes up with. As it's moving through that overlap period, it's basically, at the beginning, it uses 100% of the old rating and none of the new. And then 1% in, it uses 99% of the old rating and 1% of the new one. And then slowly, when you get to the end of the overlap period, it's using 100% of the new rating and 0% of the old rating. What that means is the flow record smoothly transitions between the ratings and you don't get a step in your flow value. So I don't know whether you, with ratings, need to overlap them, but it is supported if that's the way you do ratings. And that's certainly very common for us in New Zealand because our ratings tend to, it's an event. A big rainstorm's gone through. We weren't exactly there when it was happening, so we didn't know exactly how this change occurred. When did the big boulders change through? How did the, when did the scour occur? So what we do is we tend to just blur it. We blend it over a few hours or whatever we, based on the event itself, and we know the characteristic of the event, we basically blend it over that event. Generally the recession of the event, I think. So where are we now with this one? So we have now said that this one will apply. So if we produce a rating now, when we save it, we will start getting flow values in our discharge.working. So now we're up to step 5, where we're actually going to try and build it. First step in that is we need to set the precisions we're seeing of things. So again in our setup menu here in the rating tool, precisions, it just says how many decimal places, or how do you want the numbers to look when you're working with this tool. What precision do you want to work through in your rating editor? For our example, we want it to be 4. You can set it to whatever you like. You've got a choice between decimal places or significant figures. In our case, we don't actually need to change it. We're happy with 4 and 4, but just to let you know, you can change it if you want to. And by the way, just so people are aware that while this example and what we're going to do here today is for stage discharge, you could use this method, and we use this method, say, for going from turbidity to suspended sediments. If you want to start doing suspended sediment ratings, this sort of thing, it can be used to produce ratings for other things. It's not just stage discharge. Anything that kind of needs these lookup curves, the tool can do that. Obviously, the focus of it is stage discharge, and that's what we're doing today, but it is generically designed to build rating curves. Okay, so in rating zoom 1, so we move to this view here, and we want to have a look at it. So I might make it a bit bigger for now while we're working with it. What we are told to do is we're going to put 2 points in, and the 2 points that we should put in, and you use this button to put points, is we want to put one at the bottom and one at the top. And at the beginning, just put them in, roughly at the bottom and the top, and then we're going to tweak them. So you click on the add button, go to your bottom, there's 1 point, and we add 1 at the top. And there's our first go. That's very similar to the rating, the kind of concept we had before. And it's the same sort of pattern. It's not matching well because, as we know at the moment, our offset's not correct, but it is the first start of it. What we then want to do for now is we want to try and get our ends of our ratings to be going through the center of our last, or first and last, or lowest and highest gauging. So what we do is we want to zoom in a bit and have a look and try and make sure that the line as it is at the moment is going through here. Now we're going to end up doing this a bit, so don't get too. So we zoom, hit the zoom button. So there's a button up here, zoom, and then we can just have a look at the far end, and you can see in this view here, this is not doing a good job at the moment of going through the center of that. So we want to move the rating point, and this button over here, and all of these icons, if you hover over them, they tell you what they do, so that's quite useful. But this one, we want to do the move point. So we click on the move button, and then we can grab this, and we want to move it and again, we're going to tweak it again, so don't get too carried away, but you want to try and get it going through the middle. And then we wanted to do the same at the other end. There's a couple of options because now we can't see the other end of our rating in this view. You can zoom out by hitting this zoom out button here, undo zoom, or this reset one up here will always take you back to a reset view of seeing all. So I'll just click on that one for now. You can see we're back out there. Now what we want to do is the same process and zoom in at this end and just put it through the middle. So zoom, hit your zoom button again. With your mouse, drag the area that you are interested in, it'll zoom. Again, it's not that great through the middle, so we're going to move it. And let's put it through what looks closer to the middle. And if we have a look at that, we now have a rating that kind of goes through the middle. And if we look at it in the two zooms, we can see that it's not doing a great job of going through the gaugings. What it then suggests we do, and what we should do is if your gaugings are looking like mine, what we probably want to do is the ones that we're particularly interested in, normally we've got the chart showing all gaugings, right? So the way this chart is currently set up, it's showing all gaugings that we've ever defined in small icons. Ones that we select, which is effectively saying we're interested in at the moment, if you select them, they become bigger. So what we want to do is we want to make them all bigger. And so what you can do to do that is if you click on one with your mouse, say at the top, then scroll to the bottom, hold shift down and click with your mouse again, you should get them all selected. And then if you click this little green selection button up here, that will select them all. And then they will all become sort of selectable. The thing about that, the ones that are shown, is not only do you now start seeing their IDs, so this is, you know, when I was going through the field visits with you, I was getting you to add these IDs. This is where making sure you got the IDs is very valuable, because it becomes very easy to see, oh, this rating is this one. That was that one done at that time. And so it's very valuable when we start getting into these views to have these IDs in, because it makes it easy to work out which gauging is which if I want to look at more details about it. The other advantage of having them selected is those ones that you're considering, i.e. you've selected, appear on this shift diagram. And so we get some idea of how they fit on the curve, and we will get to it fairly shortly, where we will attempt to try and minimize the errors on this by adjusting the offset. What they asked us to do is have a look at a bit of the details about gauging 01 to sort of understand our channel. So it turns out that we put in a picture in when we were loading the field visit information in this visit. So if you find in your field visit table in this field visit view, the gauging that is dated 2018, 7th of August, and you double click it, so I'm going to double click it with my mouse, it's going to take me, as I said, through to the view of that rating. Now we know that when we did this one, we actually added a picture. And as a hydrologist, we're told, and this is I'm reading this basically from the manual, that because we know that this is the shape of the channel, we know that the point of zero flow is effectively the bottom. So I'm just looking at what I'm looking at here is we're at this part of the chart. So we're on page 80. And it's saying, you know, notice that the measurements are concave in the rating zone. So double click and look at the field visit. So we see this picture, which is representative of the channel we are pretending our site is. And it says, you know, you will see there's a alluvial gravel bed with parabolic U shape. From the principle of hydraulic relations, we can expect that this channel shape has an exponent of 2.17. So this is what I talked about before, that certain shapes are known to have particular exponents. And so as part of building your rating, you can sort of look at the exponents your formulas are coming up with to know does it look likely for the channel, for the channel geometry, and an offset equal to the gauge height at the bottom of the channel. So this gives us some ideas of what we're seeking to do with the rating, in terms of we should see formulas with exponents something like 2.17, and helps indicate what we need to do to find the gauging. Sorry, the offset. So what we're now going to do is we're moving on to this bit of of the exercise, where we're going to try and find the offset and see if we can get it to fit these points as well as we can. So going back to the exercise, to do this, what we need to do is go back into our rating tool, head to the offset manager, and we put this in. Now we know a start point is something like 1.5 meters. If we put that in, we can see that. Now here's an example again of where the charting has sort of moved and doesn't show our whole range. So again, if we click on the auto scale up here, it'll bring back into a view where we can see everything. And we can see in this view that we're still not going through our gaugings terribly well. We can probably do better, we would think. And so what we can do is have a look to see how we improve that. The way to do that is we adjust this. Now there is an up down button that adjusts it, and you can see it takes it up, and we can see that we have some impact. We can see visually whether it's potentially getting better through this view and also this view, because what we're trying to do is get no bias around our 0 point and get the points as general, the gaugings, as close to 0 as we can. So if we keep increasing this, you can see these points are actually getting further away from 0. And you can see it visually over here. You can see the lines getting further away from the gaugings. So as we increase this, we're actually not improving things, we're making it worse. So we're heading the wrong direction. So we start heading down. And we should see as we do this, we can see the lines coming in and our errors are getting less. We'll get to that in a minute. So we keep going. There we are, 1.5, 1.4, that's not too bad. 1.3, okay, we're starting to go the other direction now that we're down at 1.3. So we're sort of saying, well, something like 1.4 is looking about right. What we can then do is hone in. When I was using the up and down button in here, what it was using as the adjustment is the step in here. So to do a more accurate job of this, you can set the step to a smaller value. So let's make it 0.01. So it was 0.1. Let's make it 0.01. And again, just carry on looking. What we can do also is, as this starts getting close to 0, you can click on this, again, auto scale, and it will rescale this chart. Because as you get closer to 0, it can do a better job of giving you a fine scale and you can see what's going on again. So let's, again, just adjust up and down. Do we look like we're getting better? Does sort of look like it's getting better. Oh yeah, we've got a bit of gap. Oh yeah, it's somewhere around here starting to look good. One of the things that they do suggest as you're going through this process is you will probably find that your endpoints may not be matching up as well again. So what they encourage you to do is, as you're looking at this, also re-look at your endpoints and make sure they're still going through the middle. So if we go and have a look here, that one's possibly not too bad. We just drag it out and have a look. Whoop. So you use the move. Okay. And then check the top end. So zoom out and then zoom in at the top end. And I think what we might find is this one's not so good. See, that one's no longer going quite through so well, which is what we're seeing. See, these gaugings at the top end are plotting a bit further off the higher stages, so we can probably improve them. You should find, if we move this to go through the center of that a bit better, you will probably find these couple of gaugings will be better. So let's do that. Let's move it. And you'll see that those have sort of headed back towards your 0 point a bit more. And again, we might want to rescale that so we can see it. Something to note over here, did you see this? Well, one of these gaugings over here has a box and whiskers on. which also gives you some idea of the uncertainty on it. If you cast your mind back to one of the early gaugings that we loaded in the field visit side of things, remember we talked about one where we set the uncertainty to that uncertainty B method or the uncertainty A method, and we said if we set those uncertainties up, you get the box and whiskers. This is where we were talking about. So if you, as part of the and we can find that, so maybe what we do is we zoom in on that one and find out which gauging it is. It's this one here. If we double click on that one, when we come back and look at the details of it, if we look at the discharge definition, we added this uncertainty approach, if you remember that, and we set it to type B and it was good. That is why that gauging is giving us some box and whiskers. If we'd done that with the others, they'd all have some value, and that can be helpful when because what we're trying to do is sort of minimize the errors overall for our 0 point. In general, having box and whiskers can help assist with that to give you some idea of, what tolerance should you be putting on that particular gauging in terms of positioning it. So that's your trade-off. If you put the uncertainties into the field visits, then you'll get that assistance here when you're looking at preparing your ratings. So let's come back and have another look at this. So we'll go back to our full view. So now that we've had a go at cleaning up our ends again, we'll just have another look around our gaugings and see if we think we can improve them at all. So let's just go that direction. Do we think they're coming in when we're going up? I think they're going further away now. We're probably making things worse, so let's come back. And you get to experiment and decide, when do you think you've kind of minimized the errors. And so you can work on that and you eventually get to the point that you're happy, and then you would look to save that and use this rating. So I'm just kind of go through that example. So let's just remember whatever you decided the number might be, just if you've done it, just record that, because we're going to use that. Well, I'm not sure if we end up reusing it or not. We may end up using it again on the exercises, but just note it down. If we save, save, and let's exit for now. Well, actually, let's just save to the output ports. And then we go back and have a look at our flow. If we look here right at the moment, we still don't have any data there, but that's because we haven't refreshed. If we refresh now, you'll see that we have stage in our, discharge calculated. And so we can have a look at that. So we can look at these two things together. So let's look at our discharge.working and our stage.working, and let's have a look at the data. So what we are seeing is that our blue line is the discharge, and our red line was the stage. So that basically that rule that we're looking up is now using the stage and the discharge and giving us a value. If we hone in here at the beginning of 2015, oh, did I do it high enough? Did I? Did I? So what I wanted to just demonstrate, I might just do this for the point of demonstration. So one of the things you can do, see what I'm doing here, is if you're looking at this view and you click on the right click with your mouse on the gauging, you can see a summary of it, which is the date of the rating of the gauging, as well as you can see its error, which can be useful from the rating curve. So that's quite a useful plot. One thing to note about it is if you click on it, it appears and then it disappears after a period of time. If you want it to stay, you need to click it up and then move the mouse into it, just as a trick for young players. And then it'll stay there if you do it. If I pull the rating down just a little bit, I'm just going to pull it down to here. And then we save it. And then we refresh our flow. If we zoom in on this bit, we can see, if you look carefully at this period here, you can see there's no flow. And what that is because if we look at the rating I've defined, the rating is defined up to a stage level of 8.6 meters. And at this point in the flow, you can see that the stage is more like 9.1 meters. So what the rule is, if the stage is above the top of the rating, again, the discharge becomes a gap. So what we need to do if we see this is it's a sign, oh, our rating is not far enough up and we need to extend it. So step 6 in the exercise is to extend the rating to make sure we cover the full range. So what we do is we extrapolate. So the example I've got to do, so we'll just demonstrate the extrapolation is if you just want to extrapolate. So extrapolating, if we just pretend for now that that's not there, extrapolating a rating at the top end is a case of you don't have a lot of evidence for it. So you need to be really careful. You haven't got gauging, you may not have any information. The best advice is if you don't know any better and you're going to extrapolate, then you would just extrapolate on the same curve. I mean, unless you know that there's been a change in control conditions. You would extend it out, but don't extend it too far because you're on dangerous ground. So the way to do that, if you do need to extend it, is there is this extend rating line. And when you click on that, it'll put a point in. And if you grab it and drag it out, it will drag it out. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to drag it out so that the stage range it covers is the stage range you know will exist in your real world. When you're happy you've covered your stage range, you drop it. So what that's doing is it's continuing the curve on the same line, but further up into your stage range. Now, all of this you need to consider in the real world. You need to consider carefully the implications of doing this because that may or may not be appropriate in your real world based on control conditions and all those sorts of things. But if you're going to do it, that is a way of doing it. But you should be evaluating while you're doing it how much evidence you've got to do in it. And that's always the art of producing these ratings properly is looking at the evidence you've got that's backing up, trying to do that. And, you know, getting the messages out to your field teams that if you haven't got enough information, get them to target it. Now, things like high flows, obviously, your ability to get the high flows is not really up to you. You've got to wait on the natural conditions potentially to arise, but you could certainly have the team set up to know that if it does come, it does occur, that it's a priority to get a gauging out there. But in all of this, you know, you need to use the evidence as best you can, and then there's discretion on top of it, because in most cases when you're doing ratings, you don't have all the information you'd really like. Anyway, so we've extended the top end. What we still don't really have the bottom end covered well, and so because of the channel we've got, and we now know that our point of zero flow was worked out by the offset that we put in, and we know what that means is that about that level the flow is zero. We can put a point into our plot down there so that we get flow values all the way basically down to that point. The way you can do that is if you click on the rating, so we're over here in this rating tab, at our rating point, click on the first point and then insert a point above, because let's just zoom at what we're saying at the moment. If we look, before we do this, if we look down here, basically our rating stops here at 1.8 meters. And if we fed in a stage value anywhere down here between 1.8 meters and 0, as we've currently got it configured, the tool will turn around and say, I'm not giving you an answer, because we had said here, you're going to get an empty value if the value is below the rating. Now, we know that in actual fact, there's flow down to this offset in this river. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a point that describes that. So from this point, we add a row above in this case. And then the value we're saying, we know we have flow until about that offset, this 1 point, whatever you set in there. So you start by putting that in. So we put that in. And in reality, we know at that point it is about 0. Now, because we're working in log space and log space doesn't work well with zeros, you generally just put in a really small flow to get it to plot nicely. Then what you'll see, again, if you see this red line has now appeared, and if we look at it, and what it means is we will effectively get we will get a discharge value all the way basically down to the point where we say there is no flow. 1.43. It doesn't plot perfectly here. If you want this to plot nicely, you just need to add a little bit of an offset to your stage as well. So if you made this 1.433, say, is that enough? You'll see it actually put the point in, and it'll plot nicely in both linear and log space. So what we've done by adding those is we've now got flow values coming out for the entire range. And if we save our output ports and come back to this view here, see we don't have flow there. If we refresh this now, you'll see that we have a flow value for the full range, and that's because we extended the curve out. So in its simplest case, that is an example of producing a rating using the evidence that's in there. Now, as you probably saw in Evan's videos, his summary that he presented, where it can get a lot more complex than that, where you can have breakpoints and you have these section control changes. And so in reality, as I understand it, the most sort of complex rating you would have in generally should be, you would have 3 sections to your rating mainly. So that's these 3 control. You've got your section control, channel control, and then overbank. So in most cases, in a pure sense, you would have 3 main segments in your rating curve, which is nice and maintainable. And so the risk, if you start importing gaugings or ratings in this form, the challenge with them with all these points in here is they become very hard to maintain if you ever need to. So that was one of the challenges we had in moving and migrating our ratings from our old tool to our new tool. The way we migrated them ended up with quite a lot of points, because we did it by making the shape fit by putting points in, because the formula for calculating ratings in Aquarius was slightly different from tidied us, so we couldn't just do it perfectly. We had to do it through sort of putting in points. That did mean what we have is in our old ratings, we have quite a few points, not this many, but a few more than strictly probably would be necessary if we'd spent our whole life in rating in Occurrence. So as we build new ratings, they tend to be simplifying them. So we'll find a lot of our old ratings may have sort of, you know, when we look at this rating table, many of our old ratings might have 40 or 50 points in here, but the more modern ones that we built with the tool are more likely to have that sort of 3 or 4. Because we're now building them in log space and we can see the range where they should be flat across them. And basically it's across those control sections. As you've probably picked up from this conversation, you know, I'm not an expert in the rating in the real world. So I think I know how to use the tool, but I'm not an expert in all the information that you consider when building a rating. Evan, who you saw in our videos, is an active person that works in these, and you know, if you ever wanted further training or something like that in the real art, not using the tool necessarily, well, it probably would be the tool as well, but the whole thought processes and evidence and all of that you use with ratings, potentially he would be a good person that potentially could provide some training if you were interested in that, because he really knows that stuff inside out. Anyway, carrying on. So what we would next do, as we talked about, is we've produced the rating. The last step we could do is we can now grade the rating. So this is again sort of giving us starting to be able to describe the quality of the values that are coming out from the rating. And as I indicated before, generally the pattern would be your uncertainties at the bottom and the top are likely to be larger than your uncertainties in the middle, generally because at the bottom, things might be changing a lot. In the middle, you're likely to have a lot of gaugings that are recent and relevant. And at the top end, you're just not likely to have that many gaugings because that situation doesn't occur very often. So you just may not have that many. But the thing is, the ones you do have in many situations, if you've got them, they don't change much over time. So, but because you may not have a great one and you're, you know, above your top gauging, you're probably going to grade it more lowly. And in actual fact, above your top gauging, you may as well leave it unspecified because it's going to give you a gap anyway, above the top of your rating. So in their example, their suggestion was that you would set this to something like, you know, 10 estimated. We're getting slightly better in the middle, or we are getting better in the middle. So we're quite confident in here. And then as we start getting higher again, we're not quite so confident. Again, as we get into the uncertainties of the upper end of our rating. So if we save that to our output ports and then reload again our flow record, we should start to see that we have this grade carpet. So if we look at more of the whole record, you'll see bits and periods of different. So we have different grades as we move through the different stage ranges. Now, the thing to remember is that the grade the discharge gets is a combination of two things. The grade the discharge will get is the lower of the stage value at the time and the rating at the time. So it's always the lowest grade would propagate through in this case. So while you might think at first glance this is always going to be the grading of the rating, it may not be. If the stage grading is lower, then it will be the grading of the stage. As a general rule, most generally, you know, your gradings of your stage is generally probably going to be higher than probably your grading of your rating, but that's not always true. But that's the impact. So you can start grading. You don't have to. If you don't grade, then if you don't grade here, as in you leave it unspecified, the grade on the discharge will be the grade of the stage. So -1 doesn't count as lowest in that regard. If you haven't specified it, then the lowest will actually be just the stage grade. If you want to, there's quite a lot of common reporting, I think, in terms of methods that people want to report ratings if they're sharing them with people. And I'm not sure if it's the terminology used, but it's called an expanded rating table in a query. So if you actually want to get this out, not the rating, not in the sort of formula view, but as a series of points, you can use this file, and there's this expanded rating table option where you get to pick the rating that you're interested in, or the point in time you want the rating exported for. And then you can export it out. You get to say the precision, and if you export it out, so it's going to put it in my documents xtable.txt, is you get this sort of format output, which basically gives you the graduated table of 1.4 meters plus another whatever centimeters, so that's 1.40. Well, the first one is 1.44 centimeters. What's the flow? 0.09. So that is a format that's quite common in terms of wanting to report your rating tables, and that can be produced out of the tool. Just looking at so that was just 8 printing the rating table. Okay, so is this the last one in this bit? The last section of this to have a look at a few of the derived discharges that we've got now. So if we look, and we can probably close that for now. If we can close that and come back to this view here, we can see that our daily mean discharge is calculated. Interesting in first concept, I'm not quite sure why our daily total one isn't. We'll have a look at that in a minute and see if we can explain it. But if we look at that, if we look at the ones that are calculated, if we look at our working and choose to look at our daily mean that we set up as an automatic derivation, we can see how they look. If we zoom in into a period where we can see it, so you can see the blue one is our continuous record and the red is our daily mean. So it's the mean of these values. And it was placed at the end of it. And we're not seeing the data points because we've turned them off. So if you turn them on, you can see the actual data points. So there's the point, which is the mean for this day. So you can see that's now being calculated. Now, let's have a quick look and see if we can understand why, because I would have thought at first glance, I would have expected we would have a daily total. So let's have a look at the rules on this and see if we can see why we don't have that. So the rule for this record is it's a statistic calculation, total amount. What's it using as its input? It's using the discharge.working that we know is populated every day. It's got this coverage grading. And we're writing that to discharge totals. Measurement method, gap tolerance. It was tricking me. It is calculated. So we can also have a look at if we want to. So that was just a refresh issue, obviously. If we look at that and compare it to the discharge values, what we'll see is we're seeing this as a plot of the cumulative values of the volume. So you can see the volume grows up greatly in the day when we had the higher flow, and then it grows up a little bit less. And here we have intermittent stage value. So this is where, again, we'd have to have a look to see why, but we've got some intermittent stage, only various points. That's probably one of our corrections that we didn't gap fill. And because that's not achieving the coverage rules, then this statistic is not using that. So this, if we come back to what we looked here, if we look at the details of this rule, we said it's a total. Sorry, it's coming from the working. It's a total, a daily total, but we had this coverage rule that said, yes, only give it to me if I've got 100% coverage. And we can see in the period we were looking at that there wasn't 100% coverage of the flow, and therefore the statistic did not get calculated. And that's why the cumulative total obviously sort of has a bit of a pause. And then once we get good coverage again, it starts growing up again. So the formula is doing what we asked, and really what we would probably want to look at in this record is why does this particular phase of it have so many gaps in it? And I can't remember, I'm guessing that's one of the corrections that we did, and we probably put some points in but then didn't gap fill it. So these are the trade-offs, and that's what happens when you set that rule. Now if we change that rule, which we can if we want to, so let's change the rule and say, where are we? Sorry, in the rule, if we actually change the coverage and say, don't require a minimum. So let's just be simple about it. We're going to say no, anything's okay. We need to give the system a little bit of time to recalculate. And I'm not sure how long exactly that would take on this test system, but let's just try refreshing. Well, actually, we'll just refresh here and wait till we see the updated time on this has changed. Where are we? So that looks like that's about now in my time. So if we come and refresh this screen, so what I'd expect to see is we'll still see that pattern, but I would expect to see, what I was expecting to see is we would see a bit of a flat line across here because there's so few points, it's not actually going to have a lot of extra volume. It says it's gone through, but I would expect to see some values through here. So we'd need to come back and have a look at exactly why that did that or didn't do it. But you can change these rules in terms of the coverage. It is to do with this coverage rule, which is defining how that recalculates. So now we can see we have all of the data sets in our test system have been working. So we've been through the process of essentially building everything that would create the outputs for this site. We've looked at the methods that are used to modify it. Now what we're ready to move into, and I suggest we have a bit of a break before we do, but is we're about to move into lesson 7, which we did start on yesterday and we'll come back to after the break. What this is about now is it's talking about the corrections that we've done previously have always been kind of in a historic context in terms of data's been loaded, we've looked at the data, we've seen there's a problem with the data, we've made a decision to manual decision to fix it. What we're talking about now with thresholds and open-ended corrections is we're sort of saying, but some of these rules, it would just be nice if when we load the new data, those rules just do that cleanup for us. We don't have to manually do it. We're confident with this description of this correction. Please just apply it when data is added. And that is what these lesson 7 corrections are about. Thresholds and open-ended will do this. Once you've defined them, whenever data is added, those rules will be applied to that, and whatever change is required is automatically made. So that's what we'll do, and we'll come back and do that in 11:07. I suggest we have a bit of a break before we do that, because we're doing all right for time again. So how long do we suggest we have a break for?
Hi, sir. I think we can have a 10-minute break.
10 minutes. So what time shall we be back?
So before we go, okay, it's now 10:17, so we'll have a 10-minute break. So please be back po at around 10, siguro exactly 10:30 na rin po. But before we go for a break, we'd like to assign as early as now for a personnel from field office who will give us the recap for tomorrow. So can I hear from Sir Raja Corpus from Maris? Sir, are you here po? Sir Raja Corpus from Maris?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, sir. Since our topic for today is about rating curve development, and you're one of the participants who has hands-on experience in this topic, will it be okay if we assign you to give us the recap for tomorrow?
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
All right, sir. Thank you. So that's it po. So Sir Mike, let's have a 10-minute break po. So for the participants po, to our participants po from the central office who's attending the training here, please get na rin po yung inyong snacks dito sa HRD office. So that's all po. So again, it's now 10:18. So please be back po at exactly 10:30. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Yan. Sinonect ko na lang sa...
Wala mang sound.
All right, it's now 10:30. So may I request the participants to turn on your camera so we know if everybody is back.
Ang problema kasi hindi
Okay, so I think most of the participants are already here. So Sir Mike, we can proceed po with the lesson.
Sige sir, sasabihin ko po kay Ma'am Portia.
Welcome back. I'll just reset my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Villanueva.
Okay, so lesson 7. So as I said, where we're moving to now is we've got a lot of data, and the correction methods that we have been using were ones where they were made after the fact in terms of the data comes in, it's calculated, we then manually look at it, we see problems, and we correct it. In many, if you're using a telemetry system and you've got near real time happening, it's advantageous to take out what we can in terms of values that we think are wrong automatically, rather than needing to wait until someone's manually reviewed the data. So there's various techniques that the tool has that enables us to do this, and the two of them that we're mainly going to look at is a threshold. So a threshold is basically a fairly simple concept in terms of it's a constant that you get to define in a system, and basically say to the system, if you want to, you can say basically if the value is above this value or below this value, please suppress it, which means automatically delete it. So that the thresholds are oriented at, I guess, extreme values that are not real world, or the sensor should not produce those sort of values. Open-ended corrections are some of the others where they're almost elements of the other types of corrections we were looking at yesterday, but just applied with no end date, and then they automatically make the same sort of correction. So we'll just work through a couple of examples of that. So what we were doing here in terms of our real world analogy is we're sort of saying, well, we've been working with a logger download file up till now. Now what we're pretending to do is we had a telemetry data set. What we've done, what we will do, and we actually did it yesterday, but we'll relook at it, is we will then plumb that stage.telemetry data set automatically into our working stage.working one. And then we will set up some rules for correcting the data. So let's just review what we did do yesterday, but just re-go over it and make sure we understand why we did it. So the main record that we have been working with is the stage.working. And if we look at how that is configured, stage.working, now that we've changed it, is when we hover over its type, we can see it's a derived one. So it's based on rules. It's not one we're loading data into. We're using rules to derive it. And so that means if we want to see what it's doing, we need to open it and edit it. And then we need to look at what are those rules. And those rules are defined by the processing periods, where you can have different rules for different parts of time. So in this case, we now have, and that's because we've done this step one, is we have one rule for this data set from the beginning of it until this date and time. And then we have a second rule, which is described here, from that date and time onwards. Roughly both of them are a pass through. So what we're saying is both the rules are just passing through some other data set, but obviously we've used a different data set perhaps. And what we see if we look at those is when we first set it up, we said stage.working, we're going to bring that in from our stage.logger. So that in our real world scenario was the logger is when we go to do field visits, we manually download the data from the logger file. When we come back into the office, we load that data into the stage.logger. So for our stage.working, from in the early life of the site, that's how it's got its data. But now, after a period of time of operation, we added a telemetry feed to the site. So now that we've got this telemetry feed, or let's say now was 21st of January 2014, we now have a telemetry feed at that site. So let's, instead of getting stage.working, getting its data from the logger when we've downloaded, let's load the stage.working automatically from this telemetry feed. So we changed the rule from this date and said from this date on, please get your data from the stage.telemetry. So that's great. So we've changed that rule. What's the impact of that? The nice thing about having done that through a stage.working is that stage.working is what we use as part of our rating to create our discharge. So what that means is if we look at the discharge.working rule, its processing period is that it's rating model derived, and it's using this rating and it's using the stage.working data set. So the nice thing about that rule was, because we'd done stage.working as a rule-based thing, when we changed our mind about how we wanted to populate that, we didn't need to do anything to continue to get discharge calculating, because that rule didn't need to change. It still used the stage.working. The fact that we changed the rule about where stage.working got its data from meant we didn't need to change the rule for the discharge. So this is how it's quite useful to put a sort of hierarchy in of some of these data sets. Is you put these sort of derived ones on top of your more observational ones, so and base your rules on the derived ones, and that way, if you ever want to change your rules about what's populating these things, you only need to change that rule in one place, and all your calculation-based ones don't need to be modified because they just continue to use the stage.working same. So that's quite a good pattern. We use that at NIWA for our stuff. So our pattern, we don't call it stage.working, we call it stage.master. It's your choice what kind of conventions you want to come up with, but we call it stage.master, and our one will normally be plumbed in to be getting its data from our telemetry primary. But if we ever have a problem with our stage.telemetry primary, we just change the rule on our stage.master and say, please, for this period of time, get your data from the telemetry backup. And it means we don't have to change any of our other rules because all our other rule-based stuff is always looking at the stage.master. And so we can hide some of those complexities and not need to change too much. So what we've done in what we did in the step one is we kind of pretended we'd moved on into the world, and we now had a telemetry at the site. And so we changed our working rule to be loading from that. So we did that yesterday by adding this processing period and saying, obviously, that new rule is get it from the telemetry. Then what we did to make things actually happen is we actually appended some data into that stage.telemetry file. And what we saw once we added some data into there is in our, whoops, I don't really want to open Edge, is what we saw is when we loaded the data, we saw it load into the stage.telemetry, but we equally saw that extra data was added to the end of our stage.working, which is as we expected based on the rules we set up. So that was what we did in step 2. We added some data and we saw that percolating through to the derived ones. The other step that we did do yesterday, and we should look at it because I set you a little bit wrong about that. I said this wasn't an open-ended correction, but it is an open-ended correction. And the reason it is an open-ended correction is when we set the dates, the key thing about making it an open-ended correction is we set this flag here to end of time. So what that means, instead, normally in all the other edits we'd done manually, we had set a period, you know, we selected a period, which was very definitively, please make this correction from the start point to this end point. Whereas when you did this one yesterday, we said, well, there is no end point to it. And what that tells the system is because there's no end point on it, whenever additional data is added, this rule that we have defined should also be applied to it. So that is what we did set up. So that's where we got to. And if we look at our stage dot, where we are currently now with our stage dot working, is it looks like this. And you can see the various corrections that we've made on the system. And we knew that when we were working on it, it was mainly the 2014, and then we added this sort of period through to 2015. And you can see that some of this data has been automatically corrected. So some of these spikes down are automatically taken out, which presumably that's what we wanted to do. And again, just reviewing where we got to yesterday in terms of looking at these charts, you can see that any time series has two views. There is the raw view, which is what it is actually loaded with, and then after corrections applied, what its corrected view is. So you can see when this data was loaded, there was all of this, but the correction's taken it out. So the raw view shows it, but it's not there in the corrected. So if you don't want to be distracted by that, or you just want to see it, you can, through the UI, you just click on these to turn them on and off. There's quite a few options around these for how you can set up your charts and settings. So it is, when you're using the tool, it's worth exploring these things. Like we can force the scales to be logarithmic if you want to. You can fix the ranges. You can do this. There is this level of control. So there's a few things in these UIs that are worth just spending time. We've had a quick look at most of them, but it's always good to just revisit them. You can also see when you select a period of time that you get some statistics down here in the bottom too for the period of time that it's showing. So you can see the minimum on a screen. So there is some useful little base statistics that you can see based on the views that you're creating. So it's sometimes quite useful. You just wonder, oh, what was the minimum on the screen? You can actually often see it down the bottom here, depending on the context of the view and what time series type it is. It gives you different statistics. So that is where we got to yesterday. We did start talking about priority, and in these next couple of exercises, we should see the impact of this priority. So we're now up to step 4 in this, where we're going to apply a gap fill. So we will do that according to the instructions. So we are looking at the correct data set. So what we want to do is select the entire period of the well, we can just select a small period if you want and then make it the entire period. So select it and then click beginning and end, because this is an open-ended correction. Then what we want to do is we want to set a gap fill rule. So what we're saying, what are we, they've indicated to us, they're saying, according to our rules, we have a rule in a business process that says we're allowed to fill in any gap that is shorter than 180 minutes. Sorry, I got that wrong. We want the infill to be 15 minutes. And we're happy that we fill in any gap that is shorter than 180 minutes. And again, you need to decide for the parameter that you're really talking about and the rate of change and what you know people are using for it. Are you really happy to be filling in data that's up to 3 hours of it being missing? But in this case, that's what we've said we would do. We've said we'll just put a linear fill in it, which means the points that exist is just going to put a linear interpretation between them. And for this example, and to demonstrate things, we have been asked to set that as a post activity. And then we go apply and save. And what we should notice is, which we'd need to go back and have a look at, is that bits that were trimmed out have now been gap filled. So if we, what that means is if we zoom back out, and we zoom in a period that were trimmed, so these bits, what we would have been doing is in trimming these bits, we would have been leaving in gap periods, but with our gap fill, it's now infilled those gaps, so you've got a nice continuous record. So that's what the gap fill doing. So the first thing we did, the first rule, because the first rule we wrote, so let's looking at this. The first rule we wrote yesterday was this one, which took out the trimming. We had set that priority to pre. So what we know that means is that rule runs first. So when basically this rule runs for the same period of time, this one runs first. When it's finished and it's made whatever corrections it makes, we then run our gap fill one, because our gap fill one is set to post, right? So we're talking on the gap fill one, we set this setting to post, and because pre's run before posts, it means that as data is loaded, the first thing it'll do is it'll do the outlier trim, which will take out some of the points, and then after that, the gap filling will then, assuming that the gap that was created is less than 3 hours, will fill them back in with linear interpretation. So that is, we talked about it, that's how you can get some control over ensuring that the corrections run in the order you need them to do. Because if those two ran in the other order, you would get a different result, because if we ran the gap fill first, well, we hadn't deleted anything, so there wouldn't have been any gaps. Then we did the outlier trim, we'd have taken out the data, but we'd have ended up with some gaps in it. So you needed to control that, because the point of the gap fill was to fill in those things that the outlier trim takes out. Does that make sense? So that's why these exist. Often you don't need to use them. It's mainly in these open-ended corrections where you just need to think them through, and where you need to sort of make sure they run in the right order. You do have 3 options in terms of how you can order them to ensure that they occur in the right order. So it's time to move on to thresholds. So thresholds are quite, I guess, a blunt instrument in terms of using them, but they have a value because in many cases we do have data that we know the acceptable values might be 0 to 2000, but then occasionally they do give you values over 2000, and that means things are going wrong, and it would be nice to take them out. So, and so a correction like this is quite useful, even though it's quite basic. So we will create one of these. So this is step 5. So the way to create thresholds, if you remember back to day 1, we did quickly show you that there is this tab where thresholds can exist. And we can see in this example at the moment, there aren't any. And that's because we haven't defined any. The way to define them is to go back to your site menu and pick your hamburger. And then we can put in, there is an option here to create a new threshold. So that's what we can do. So we'll click on that. Thresholds are very specific. While they're tied to the location, they are specific to a data set. So the first thing you need to do is you need to tell the system for this threshold, what is it applying to? And the example they want us to apply it to is the one we've been using most of the time. Let's put it on our stage.working. Then the next thing that we need to put in is the type. So there are these options. The ones that actually really do anything are the threshold above and threshold below. So threshold above, as its name suggests, will take any values out that are above this one, and threshold below are ones that will do take out values below. The other settings, as far as I can tell in the system, are more for future expansion of the tool, but practically don't actually do anything at the moment. So sometimes you can define these constants to sort of define the constant in the system, but they don't actually necessarily do anything. So the example they want us to do is threshold below. They've said invalid value is the suggested name for this. And we get to set the processing priority. So again, it's a suppression, which again just sets the priorities, and again makes suppression. Suppression means it'll be last. So again, because this is effectively another correction, so we need to know its order relative to the others. And the general expectation is you would set these to suppression, which means it will always be done last. So after all the other corrections have been applied, this one will be corrected and we'll take out any erroneous values that are left. In this case, we are setting it to beginning a record, end a record. We're wanting it to say 1.45 because in this example, we're saying anything below that is not real. We have two choices. We can make it a suppressing change, which means it automatically removes the data, or you can do it. I'm not actually sure, to be honest, now what it does if you don't suppress it. It used to be when you plot it, it just used to show you a line sort of informing you that you were above it. It was just informative in the visuals. To be honest, I mean, because most of the time now when I do these things, it is to suppress data. I'm not quite sure what happens if you don't use the suppression flag. So if you set this up and don't tick that, maybe if we get time, we can have a look. But with suppression, what that will do is it'll take any value, effectively what this rule is now saying, any value that is below 1.45, we will automatically delete it. And again, in a correction stack sense, it's not really deleted, it's just soft deleted in that term. We still have records of this, but from a visual point of view, if you ask for that data point, it'll say it's a gap. So we save that. And then we should be able to look for it. So if we go back to our view where we're looking at the time series, look at our stage.working and open it in the correction stack, in the data review tool. We need to see if we had any values below 1.45. Where's our lowest? So what is it saying here? Open the stage. I'm just reading what we're saying here. Open the stage of working. Hover your mouse over the purple line to display the threshold information. I think this might be a case of where the manual is a little bit out of date with the functionality. I think we have to go looking for these now. It doesn't quite show them as obviously as it used to. So if we see if we can find a value below 1.45, well, most of them have already been taken out. I think most of our values below 1.45. So what they have said to really demonstrate this is you go to your revisions tab and the outlier trim and gap fill. Now we need to just get the dates on these. So if we zoom this up so we can see the full dates. So we can see these are our open-ended corrections. So if we sort them by end time, we can see there. So the suggestion is to see the impact of this threshold is that we temporarily delete these corrections. So we won't save them. So if we delete them now, so we'll delete and delete. In our view of the world, we have deleted that data, and the view we will see was with that deleted, but we haven't actually saved this to the server. So you can experiment with these things without actually saving them. Oops. And can we see the impact of this threshold now? Can anyone, let's zoom in on this. They still seem to have been taken out. Do I need to take out another correction? Let's have a look. Yep. Okay, so I needed to take out another correction to demonstrate this. So what we can see now is that there is a threshold that is taking out some data. So if we, presumably is it this area here, we can see an example. Well, we stay zoomed out. Because we had some automatic corrections that were already taking out our values that are effectively less than 1.45, we were struggling to see this. But what I've done is I've temporarily deleted these corrections. And now we can see that there is it showing us that this record would take out values below this threshold. So anything that's below here will be taken out automatically by the system. So that's how that correction will work. Quite simple. And so you can also, if we sort of discard all of that, we close that. So those are, once you've done this, created this threshold, you can see them sitting here. So you can review them here, and if you want to add more, you use the same process, new threshold, or you can change the one that you've got in terms of if you've decided it's not 1.45, you know, it's a different value. You can change that. Again, you can change the thresholds over time. So what we had in one of my other projects in another country is that we had the example where the sensors were replaced every 3 years and the sites slightly moved, but they joined the time series together. But for each of the sites, there was a minimum, I guess, value that was real world. And that changed every time they slightly changed the site. And so they put thresholds into the system with date periods in them to clean up the data for them that varied over time. So it's useful that we can do these we can have them applying for any specific periods of time if we want to. Or we can leave them basically open-ended. But that's how we see them, and if we want to delete it, that's the option there to delete them. Is there any questions about that? In terms of how priorities work and open-ended corrections? If you want to see more about them, I mean, in our normal pattern, if you go to help and type in something like open-ended, you can see open-ended corrections. So there's various bits of help that will explain it to you. You can see here is a list of the ones of the corrections that actually are able to be set open-ended. So you can see some of them you can set an open start point, and some of them you can set an open end point. So many of the corrections that we went over the other day, you can make open-ended. The adjustable trim you can't, but most of the other corrections you can do open-ended, and that includes grading or notes or qualifiers. So you can put that in. So the thought for a qualifier or a note is you kind of think about it and go, hang on, why would I put in an open-ended correction for a note? Surely I kind of need to know that in the time. So the example would be, the example we had is the river was set up and we had a slip up the river. So for a period of time, the data was impacted by that slip, and that was working its way through, and therefore our rating wasn't necessarily entirely reliable because things were changing fairly rapidly as that debris worked its way through. So what you might do for that period of time is you temporarily open an open-ended note or an open-ended correction, which says, you know, the site is currently being impacted by the slip upstream of the site. And so while data is appended, that note will continue to apply. Once the hydrologists know that that slip's sort of worked its whole way through, you would then just put an end date on that correction instead of keeping it open-ended. So open-ended might be something that's open-ended for now. It doesn't need to be open-ended forever. You might eventually put an end date and stop it. But that's why you might use it for notes and location notes and that sort of thing. But we can use it for our corrections. And so that's how we can start improving our near real-time view of the data. What else does it say under there? So just generally, you can search through the various bits of help when you find them to see what advice you can get. So we talked about these priorities, pre-normal. Hopefully now you understand now how you would use them, mainly on these near real-time or these open-ended type corrections. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to add some more data to it, to our telemetry file, and then we're going to have a look at some of the corrections that are still there, which ones applied automatically and which ones do we still need to make. So for this one, so step 6, page 90, if we go to our location, We know we've set up some append rules. So in this case, we can just go to the append data page. If we find our data, and this is lesson 7, what they suggested this time, what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit more data. Yesterday we added the stage 2. This time we're going to add the stage 3. So it's adding it. And if we quickly look while that's going on, the end date is currently 15th of January 2015, and we can see the data sets that have all got their data based on that are derived probably on that data, directly or indirectly. So 15th of January 2015, still loading it. There we go. We've added another 24,000 points, and if we refresh this, we now see our end date. So we've got data right through now to September that year. And you will see our derived items have also got data through to that period. Interestingly, you might look at these ones and go, well, those ones have values for a bit further on. Why would that be? And what that is that daily value ones, they have coverage rules. There is sufficient data in terms of getting data through to 23, half-past 11 on the 30th, that the daily values, because remember the daily value was ones we said put the actual answer in at the end of the period. So the daily one would be 1st to the 10th at 00. And because we've passed the coverage rules, there are values for those, which is why they seem to be a little bit further forward. But it does actually make sense when you think about that, because most of the data is there and it's enough data for the coverage rule to allow that statistic to be calculated. So we've appended that data. What do the manuals suggest we go and have a look at? So notice the open-ended corrections have been applied to the new data. So let's have a look and see if we can see that. So if we open it, and remembering that the data we added was kind of from February onwards to the end of September. So let's see if we can see some signs of some corrections. So we'll just close that. Where are we? 2015. So if we move to about there somewhere. So there hasn't been a lot, but we can see normally the sign of seeing where the corrections have again is we can see some raw data, which is stuff in green, which I guess at the size of this presentation, you guys might be struggling to see it, but in there, you can see there's a period here where we can see some green, which is a sign that a correction has taken place. So that is the application of our automatic corrections. And if we have a look at it, what it did is it took out a couple of spikes down and then it gap filled them in for us. So we can see, so that would have been the combination of the outlier trim taking them out and then also the gap fill going through and putting a replacement point in. So we can see signs of our automatic corrections applying. So what it says is that there still should be some issues in this data that we've added that haven't been automatically corrected. So let's see if we can see them. So let's have a look at some various techniques at finding these things. So, and it says the last 2 files. So let's have a bit of a review of the data and see if we can start spotting the corrections. So let's reopen this. And at that scale, it's quite hard, I guess, to necessarily see things. I guess some things stand out in the terms of the patterns that we're looking at. This probably stands out quite strongly as unlikely to be real, and so probably needs some work. You could see this bit over here is looking quite noisy. So that's probably a period of data that needs some correction. But if you want to see it more closely, I mean, we can do, you start zooming into periods, and then some of these things that probably look like they need corrections start to appear. So if we just drag along, so one of the options is if you want to look in time, we can just drag the view along at this more zoomed in scale to give us a better idea of, we work our way through. So there's a period that would probably be needing some correction. See if we can see anything else. There's the bit that was auto-corrected. And that's the end of our data. So there might have been some, so that was a couple of places. Just looking at the text to see whether it suggested how many. So we'll come back. So anybody got a suggestion for what correction we might look to apply to correct this one? Given what we went through yesterday with the various types of correction. Does anybody want to type into the chat window what type of correction we might want to apply? Maybe what I can do is to assist is if I zoom in a bit and I mark it up. So I'll mark it up. And then I'll show you the list of options and we'll see what you think might be. So here's me going through the process of making sure I've got my marked up correction accurate. So I've marked up my period. Out of these sort of lists of options, what do you think this looks, what kind of correction does this look like it might need to be? From these sorts of names, which ones would people think it might be from yesterday? Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Maybe we can use offset. That sounds like a good suggestion to me. So the way we can do that is, again, as we remember yesterday, we select offset. We don't really care here now. Now there's a couple of options for how you can go about working this out. We could do trial and error. So if we can basically work it out. If we hover over a point near that end and see that it's 2.454 meters, you can see that's what I'm reading as the value field on that hover over point. And then I look at where we are down at this end. That's 2.224. So the difference between those two numbers, which if I can do my maths, is about 0.23. So if we add, see if my math's any good, 0.23 to that, it would have that impact. And without looking too closely at it, that's probably a pretty good correction. Now, this would be, you would have more confidence with this if there was some field visit information here. There is no sign in this view that there was a field visit here. Commonly, if you looked at this sort of thing, you would generally expect this kind of big step down and step up at this kind of scale often wouldn't correct itself. It would be someone went to visit and fixed the problem. So you would generally expect to see, you would hope to see a field visit piece of information. Sometimes these kind of blockages or whatever else can fix themselves naturally. So I guess what we're pretending in this case is it has been natural. So certainly that would be a possible correction. So we could do that. Our normal pattern would be that if we're going to do that correction, we follow it up with a grade. And then you could choose, I mean, the evidence, because there's no field visits here, your amount of confidence, would be down a little bit, but the fact that it actually fits so well at both ends and has a, the shape looks like it's working reasonably other than offset, you know, you have reasons to be somewhat confident, but anyway, you would choose which, you know, based on your grades, what kind of grade you would give it. And, you know, I might give it poor. I mean, it possibly could be fair. Just depends, you know, how strict you are in your business rules about being clear that you've modified. You know, that this is not observed. It is being modified. So we'd apply it and save it. Okay. Let's go hunt another correction. Where was that other correction that we spotted? Some data that looked like it could do with some correction. So let's just start from here maybe. I think the bit that we did spot was about here, but let's just move through this and see if we can see anything else. So I'm going to zoom in a bit and then I'm going to move through it. So let's say we want to look at about that period. Okay, does anything there look like a bit of data? I'm guessing we're thinking here. This can look like a bit, so let's zoom in a bit closer. Again, what would people's suggestion be for the correction for this one? If we look at the options. What do you think we might use on this one? I'm thinking it's potentially an offset. Now, I think when I looked at this, so the reason you'd use an offset, and I would check for this one, is that value there is 3.122. And the first point down here is 2.863. And I think when I looked at this one, that was 3.066. It's not as nice, sir, offset correction as the other one, I don't think. So let me just do a quick calculator thing on that. Oops, that doesn't look like good maths to me. 3.124. Oh, I'm in scientific, no wonder it's not working. 2.863. 0.261 offset at that end and 3.066 minus 2.803. Oh, okay. So when I did that calculation, the offset at one end is 2.261 and the other one's 2.263. So you're probably suggesting that's not too bad. So we will apply an offset correction to this one as well. So normal pattern, we found the period of interest. We now need to mark up the period that we want to edit. So we mark it up. We need to check we've got all the points we're interested in. So we zoom in with the tool and make sure we've got the right points at the beginning and the end. And because we're going to be moving everything up, we want to set the points as the first and last point that we think needs to be moved. And then we would suggest that this is an offset. And 0.262. Shall we pick the middle? Apply. And if we zoom out and look at that, or zoom in a bit, that doesn't look too bad at that end. Not too bad at that end. That's probably a pretty good correction. And then we can also grade it. Put in maybe a fair. We save it. Right. So let's move into this next correction and let's see what you think would be the suggestion for the correction on this one. So let's go and find it again. So zoom out a bit and let's find, where was it? So this is another method of moving through your data, is just zooming along your pane down the bottom here. So this period here, to me, looks like we were quite noisy. Can people think of what correction we did the other day? If we again look at give you the options, so I'll mark my period up. Can people remember what correction we might look to apply to this? Anybody got a suggestion? What type of correction might this one be? And in many of these cases, there are more than one way you could choose to correct it. There are often options, or you may need to do a combination of corrections together to look to fix it. So does someone want to suggest a method, and we'll try it? Anyone got a suggestion? You might want to quickly flick through your manual from the other day and have a look at it. What the different corrections were we did. The good thing about this is we can suggest a correction, we can try it, and we can see what it does. And if we don't like it, we just don't save it. So I'll wait for someone to suggest something. I'll just try and fix my markup a bit while we wait. So it looks like we start getting noisy about there. And maybe we end getting noisy about there. Anyone suggest override? Good man. Or sorry, good person. Sorry, I think that's from me. Good to see a suggestion. Right. So let's try that. So the suggestion is an override. So let's pick that and see what our options are. So we can choose, we have the options. Having decided we want to use an override, we can do a copy and paste, and that would be generally probably applicable if we had a secondary data set to refer to, which I guess in this case we don't. We could do a linear override, which says it would just put a straight line between the beginning and end values. That's probably not what we're wanting. Log linear. So that's going to put a sort of log relationship between them. There's a moving average filter with a clock drift. So which one of those do you think we would pick? Remember, we can't go too wrong. We'll try it. If it doesn't work, we'll just try something else. So what's the suggestion for which method shall we try? Which one do you think might get this? Got a suggestion? Type it in. Right, shall we try a moving average? Let's see what it does. So let's see what a moving average does. So if we set the window size number of points, okay, if we said maybe 5, what does that do? If we turn that off, can we see? That still looks quite noisy. Maybe we need to do more. Maybe we need more iterations. You can see the line sort of appearing.
Excuse me. To our participants po, please make sure that your microphone's on mute when you're not speaking. Thank you.
I think when we see this at the moment, we're still seeing it's putting it in a bit of an offset. My feeling is the correction we're looking for is one that kind of traces the bottom of this and then removes the noise that sits on top of it, because it looks like the record was there and we're spiking up to values that aren't quite so correct. So I was thinking we're looking at a method that's likely to keep the minimum in a range of points. Can anyone remember? So that's this particular filter, while looked good, probably isn't doing as good a job as we'd like. So perhaps we wanted, can people think of what the name was of the correction that we used yesterday that enabled us to sort of do a deviation from the minimum? Should we go looking for it? So I think maybe we should look at the options under the outlier trim. So in the outlier trim, we have an option to sort of say, oh, let's take anything that's a deviation, take out points that are a deviation from the minimum. So that's more what I think is possibly a good fix here. So let's maybe try that. So let's say the window size, what our values are about 5. So let's say, I don't know, 30 minutes. And what's kind of our scale here? So what happens if we go 0.05? Let's apply that and see what it does. That certainly got rid of the more extreme ones. But so let's just have a look at that. So it's still left it as quite spiky. I wonder if we can improve that. So let's have a look. Let's see what happens if we change this. So if we make that bigger, does it take out more points or less points? Let's make it 0.1. Apply. Well, that actually took out less points, because what we're basically saying is it only takes out the point if the deviation from the minimum is greater than 0.1. So we're actually making the tolerance bigger. So we probably want to go the other way. So what happens if we make it 0.1? What happens then? Oops. I need to go and reset that. Go and set my points up again. I might not get that perfect because we'll see if it works. So let's go back to the outlier. The outlier trim, we were doing a minimum. We'd said the window was 30 and we were going to do 0.01, I think we were going to try. So that's beginning to take out the noise. So you could look at variations of that. That's an improvement on all of those points. If we did that and we looked at it, so let's pretend we liked that and we thought that was a good one. If we zoom in, it would be interesting to see, have we left a whole lot of gaps? So generally with this rule, what we're seeing, now you know how you'd see gaps is if we don't see any values in there, or we can just go show gaps and there are no gaps. But so what we found is with that correction, even though it was taking out some points, the points that we're taking out were not big enough to generally result in the system thinking it had gaps. So, because what I was thinking is that if we get too aggressive in taking out points, the side of that is it ends up putting a whole lot of gaps in the system that you don't want. So you might want to follow up the correction that was taking out the points with a gap fill type correction. So put them in combination. That's where we've talked about sometimes corrections, you need to chain together a few corrections together to do it. But in this case, it hasn't actually resulted in gaps. So if you were happy with that, you could stop there. Shall we look and see if we can see anything else? I think that might have been most of the gaps when I looked at this data earlier. I think that might have been most of the major things, but let's take another perusal of this. So we'll just zoom out a bit. It's hard to see the detail, so we'll just zoom in a bit. Can we see any other? We are really zoomed in a bit. Let's zoom in a bit like that. So do you think that looks like the sign of, okay. Here's one for everybody. So what do we think we should do as a correction on this one? Looks like we've got a flat line. The sensor has stopped giving us answers. What do we think we should do? What would be the correction for this? Got it. I think that's a good idea. So gap fill, essentially with the information we've got here, sorry, gap fill, yeah, it's probably delete region, I think is what you're meaning. We don't have a lot of information to replace this data. It's quite a period where it's clearly wrong. One would suggest we probably want to delete it, which I think is probably what you were thinking when you said that. So remembering how we would do that, pick our period roughly, use the zooming in bit to have a look at our ends and make sure we've got the points. So that's the first point we think is probably wrong. Looking at the other end, we've probably got the last point correctly marked as wrong. So therefore we've got the region marked up correctly. Now we have to decide how we want to correct it. In this case, we're just going to delete it. So we would delete it and go apply, which would take the data out. We should probably put a comment in explaining why. Again, this is an example where hopefully in the real world, this flat line probably didn't come back to life of its own volition. And probably someone went to the field, and so we'd have some explanation for what we found and why we were having a flat line. And therefore we could put that information into this through the field visit information and in the comment. But right now we don't have really any evidence as to what caused it, so the best we can probably do is delete it. It's a good change though, good suggestion. Right, let's see if we can see anything else. So let's zoom out a bit. So if we look at this, is that the bit we already cleaned up a bit? So again, that is a bit hard. It kind of looks a bit noisy, but it could be natural depending on your river. So maybe if you had evidence, you might look at correcting that, but I don't think we will today. But you know, when you compare it to the rest of the record, it's not normally that noisy. So I mean, you would suggest when looking at this and reviewing it that does look somewhat abnormal. And again, hopefully the person that looks after that site might give you some insight into that. And if we understood the sensors that are there, we would probably understand whether this is misbehaving and therefore what a correction might be. But we won't do that for now. Again, this region here, so let's zoom in on that. That suddenly looks noisy. So one option I think on this one would be to do what we did with the other one, which was the what was it, outlier trim. Who can suggest another method that could be done? May not necessarily be ideal, but has anyone got a suggestion? I know there's always a fail-safe. You could always use this method, whether it's a good idea or not, but anybody got a suggestion? there is always, and I somewhat suggest this in jest, but it was one we did the other day, which was, what was it, under the override? You can just use a pencil. So you could draw it in. Well, that's hard with that hovering there. One would suggest, on average, you're not probably going to do a great job by filling in a gap by using a pencil, but you could, depending on your skill with your mouse. It would certainly have the impact of improving the look of your data. I think it's up to your procedures whether you would accept this method. But certainly that would always, is kind of one way, just about in all situations, you could choose to correct your data if you chose to. I think in general, there are probably going to be preferred alternatives to using a pencil correction for how you correct the data. We'll do one more quick look, but I think we might just about. I think that's a pretty quick, but look at that. So there we were just sort of reapplying some of our methods that we'd learned yesterday if we review data and look to sort of correct it. So as a discussion topic, the Aquatic suggest, just re-reviewing this pre, normal and post. I think I spend enough time trying to explain that on our near real-time corrections, what that setting does. This is this one, when you set your correction that we did, in terms of setting the order of it. So I think we spend enough time talking about that. Does anybody have any other questions based on anything we covered today or the last couple of days? Because in terms of what I wanted to get through today, that is it for today. That leaves us tomorrow to be doing sections 9, 10, and 11. So if we look at what that covers, tomorrow we would be looking at the remaining steps in this system, which is calculating some derived times, calculated derived. So this is more formulaic type derived time series. More the ones we've done so far are sort of statistical ones. What we're looking at is some examples of, say, formulas based ones, X plus 1, the sort of examples. We will look at data review. So what we've done so far is we've graded data, but what we haven't really looked at yet is approving data, which is about workflow and how we mark it up and the implications of that. And then we've got to look through the report side of the system. So in the system, when we look here, there is the system comes with a number of built-in reports, and we will look at a few of them in terms of what they do and don't do. So we will take a look at some of the automatic reporting options out of the system. Well, not automatic reporting, sorry, but the inbuilt reports in the system. So that's all for tomorrow. Does anybody have some questions for today based on what we did? Maybe if we want to use the last 20 minutes, I don't think I really want to start a new topic, but maybe what is worth doing, it's not quite admin, it's just coming back to look at just casting our eye over some of the things that sit in the system config, just to give you guys a bit more of a look at the sorts of things that you're going to need to set up in adopting this system. So maybe we could just spend the remaining minutes, just kind of having a look at these things and making sure that you understand where they apply and I guess beginning to think about how you might use them. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody would rather ask a question, but if we don't get any questions, I might just look through these a little bit for 20 minutes till our scheduled end time. So anybody got a question? If not, we'll have a look at that.
I think Sir Raja Corpus is raising his hand. Sir, you have a question po. Sir Raja.
Okay. Okay, sir. Regarding the
Sorry, I can't hear that. Can anybody hear?
Sorry, we're just fixing our audio here.
Okay.
Okay na. Right, okay. Sir, regarding the development of a rating curve, in a specific location or a project, can we develop two rating curves in one specific
one location?
Data, sir? Sample here in Magat. Can we develop two rating curves in
Yes,
a specific elevation sample from 100 to 120, one rating curve, and 120 to 150 is another curve, sir?
When you say 100, so that's in range, is it? Or are you talking different levels or different?
Hindi ko marinig.
Sorry? Sorry, I can't quite hear you again. When you say different ranges, are you meaning different ranges of stage or level?
Sir Raja, are you there? We cannot hear you po. Okay. Sir Michael, he just messaged it to the chat box po. Can we develop two rating curve in one particular set of data?
So I'll answer that in terms of what I know. I'm not sure it's exactly what you're. I mean, the short answer, I believe, is yes. So you can set up as many rating curves. There's certainly no technical limit in terms of if we look here, we have one rating here. I can add another rating model here. So there is no problem, and it still could be, if I call it something else, Mike's, it still could be stage discharge, or it could be something else if you want it to. So there is no problem with that. So you could certainly do that, and you could use that to derive a different continuous time series. So that is certainly possible. If you needed to combine those two separate sort of output time series, the output of those ratings in some way, possibly what we look at tomorrow might help, but there are certain types of data sets where you can put rules in, and I'm pretty sure you could put a rule in that basically says if the stage range is between here and here, use the value from this data set, and if the stage range is between here and here, use a different data set. So you could potentially have ratings populating two data sets, and then have a new derived data set that has a rule that chooses which of those two data sets to use at any point in time. That kind of capability is in the tool. So we have two equations. One equation is when low elevation and another equation for high elevation. Yeah, I'm still just not quite sure whether you couldn't just do that with one rating, because if it's stage dependent, you could just put that in the rule that if you think of how the rating is described, if we just open this one. You could effectively put in a rule for one range. So between here and here, say, between that range, you sort of have one rule. Between these two stages, you have the values for the beginning and the end. And then for the next range, you have, because that's effectively what a rating is in some ways. So maybe what you could do it in one rating. If I've not quite sure what you got. The other option is you could do two separate equations and then, as I said, potentially combine them together later through derivations. So I think you should be able to do what you would be suggesting. And it'd probably be interesting to tie this back to tomorrow when we look at the sort of examples we do tomorrow to see if we see an example that might help make it more clearly how we might potentially be able to combine data sets together in a way with the logic that you might need here. If you did two separate ratings with two separate output files, and then you needed to put some logic in that said, if the stage ranges between here and here, grab this one, and if the stage ranges between there. So yeah, I think you could do what you're talking about through the tool, through various combinations.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions? If not, do we want to spend a few minutes just looking at this list of things, or are we happy just to finish a little bit early today? Maybe I'll just really quickly go through these, and we'll do the 10-minute through the common ones that you need to look at. So if we look at this, there's approval levels, which in this system, and it's really something we'll talk about tomorrow, but this is about workflow. So the default workflow is you'd mark data and approval and working, which is what we're currently doing by default at the moment. And then in this example, they're saying you'd have two other approvals you might have. The data might go from working, presumably to in review, and then potentially approved. And we'll touch on that tomorrow. These next ones are when we were creating the new data sets, we saw various ways we could set computation periods and lists like that. So these were options in there. Computation types. Some of these are probably not editable to the user, but extended attributes. So this is something we haven't talked about, and it actually doesn't really come up. So it's probably extended attributes are the system when we created the locations. they had a real standard set of fields that you could put in. It is possible to add your own attributes. So if you say wanted to have a status field for each location, saying whether it's opened or closed, things like this sort of thing, or what other sort of attributes have we had? If it was a channel, things like this. If you want your own metadata, extra attributes, you can add them to the system. So it is possible to add your own sort of metadata fields that you can add and appear in the UI, and people can enter them. So that's quite a powerful attribute that I guess most projects that I've done have used extended attributes in some form. Maybe not huge amounts of them, but a few. Grades we've talked about. So this is quite a big list, and I said in New Zealand, you know, we tend to use a smaller list, but I'm not sure whether you already have a concept of grades in your existing operation and whether you'll just need to move them through into the system, or whether you'll need to think about what ones you want to use. My personal opinion is, you know, you can tend to get a bit carried away with too many. I personally would almost suggest this seems like too many options, and you know, I'm not sure that it's that helpful to have this many different ones. I'm not sure that it helps people. So I personally think when it comes to grades, you know, fewer options is probably almost better, but that's just my opinion. Location folders. Folders used to have they were more explicitly useful in older versions of Aquarius. The key thing to remember about location folders is when it comes to security for users and saying what sites they can see and what they can't see, you can either set that on a per location basis, or you can set it on a folder basis. So if you use folders, so when a location, basically whenever you create a location, you get to say what folder it's in, if you want to. And you can also then say this user can see this folder. So when we look here, we haven't really got it, but when you look in the user access, it's normally designed to show you the folder structures, and you can set the roles and responsibilities at that folder structure. So that probably is the main use of folders now, is to help you with hierarchy for security if you need it. Location types. So this is just the list of how you describe your stations. The main thing about that at the moment is within the tool, you can only pick one for any particular location. I believe Aquatics are looking at a feature enhancement that they might look in the future, where it may be possible to make a location have many location types. There are certainly situations we've found with our sites that you kind of go, it started off life as a hydrology station, and then because it was there, someone added some more parameters that might have been climate oriented, and therefore, you know, what kind of station type is it now? It's kind of really, well, it's kind of a hydrological station and it's a climate station, but we can only pick one. So yeah, station types and marking them in locations is always fun. Right now you get to pick one and you can say what your list is. That they might change that. Methods. So this was when we were, again, methods relate to when you're creating the locations. You get to say what kind of method, which helps you understand what type of approach is being used to measuring this data, and you set the methods up for the parameter. So HG, you may not know, but HG really is your stage. That's the shorthand for the stage parameter, which if we look further down, you'd see that. So you get to set the lists for each of your parameters. And this is where you would do that. So you can see for the different parameters down the side, we've got various options. And these are all the inbuilt ones that come with it, and you can change them to what you want. Parameters, so this is a pretty key item. This is where you get to put in the items that, you know, that suit you. You can add them. You get to set their default units, how they present by default in terms of significant figures or decimal places. It's also where you get to use your terminology. So while I've been talking stage and discharge and using, you know, the terms that are built in, if you use a different term for those things, then you could add that term that's close, you know, for the parameter, you know, you add it yourself into this list. Plugins, we haven't spent too much time on this, but this is There are various plugins that help you load in data more quickly, and these are the inbuilt ones that you can use. When we did the CSV load of the field visits, we were actually using this one. So we have kind of used them. You can define your own and add them, but that's a kind of an advanced topic. So we really haven't gone into that and won't go into that in this training, but just be aware that you can write your own methods for making it easy to load your field visit information quickly into Aquarius, not have to do it manually. But that's probably, well, it is an advanced topic. These are the built-in reports that are there. Some of them are enabled and some of them aren't. So just be aware, by default, some reports get installed, but they don't necessarily appear in the user interface automatically. So some of them could be useful, but they're not visible necessarily by default. So just be aware, you might want to turn some of these on, look at them and turn some on. Qualifiers, so we talked about qualifiers as pre-canned comments. So this is where you define those. Roles, we talked about that at the beginning. This is where you get to set up what people can do. We kind of looked at this. We haven't talked about this. This bit here are the numbers. So this is when we get into approvals, you can set the rules up for who can make which transitions in terms of approving data, say from the working to in review and to approved. You can say which roles can do which changes in the approval, so you can control that. That's what this is describing. This is basically saying this user, the admin user, can do them all, but some different lower, other users with less opportunities can do less. But again, you get to set these up for your business. Settings, a whole lot of the generic settings are here. So when you look at here, we've had this banner that's been sitting across here, and this banner is defined under one of these settings. So where is it? Is it banner or announcement? I can never remember what the word for it is. It's in this list somewhere. I just can't quite find it. You can even, oh, there it is, system, there it is. It's the system, administrator system message. If we look there. So this is where it is. So this is quite useful if you need to announce things like you're going to do there's going to be an outage for upgrades and things like that. You'd use the system message possibly to communicate that to your users that that's going to occur. So these sorts of features, there's lots of settings in there you might want to work through. This is where we load the datum. So we're saying you could put other ones in. They're basically just a list of names. So if your one for the Philippines, you would look to add that in here and potentially remove the ones you don't want. Tags, we looked at this. We use them in a simple way, but this is the list of tags and where they apply. Tags are becoming more and more important part of the system. Threshold types, oops, where did I go? Threshold types are sort of inbuilt. We don't get the choice to really set them. Units, so units relate to unit group parameters sort of work together. So you can set up your own if we need new units to go with your parameters. Again, you can do that. And then in terms of the remaining ones are the various options for setting up your users in the system. So all of us as test users in the system, we're just under credentialed users. There we are, all listed in there. But the system can be tied into Active Directory or other things. So you can integrate user and logons to that. You don't have to use separate, you can get into your organizational logon methods so that people don't have to have a separate logon for the Aquarius side of things. So that's all configured here, or at least the setting side of it. That was a really quick flick through some of the things that you will look to use and set up as you adopt the tool for your own use. And I probably won't go any further on those today, and that's just about our time anyway. So I'll say thank you very much for today, and we'll pick up again tomorrow.
Sir Mike, we have one question po from Sir Ramon. Correct me if this has been addressed already. His question is, can we publish rating curve using Aquarius web portal?
So web portal itself does not publish by default the ratings. You would tend to publish the discharge. So you would tend to, in our use, we publish the output of the ratings, which is the discharge, but not the ratings themselves. Is that the question?
Sir Ramon.
Okay, so there are probably things you could do to look and work around that if you really wanted to, but as an inbuilt functionality, no, the sort of the ratings you maintained are not standardly visible in web portal. No, not yet anyway.
All right. So are there any questions, Paul, from the participants before we go for a wrap up? Okay, so no questions so far. So I think that would be all, Sir Mike. So thank you for the informations and for the topics you have discussed. So that would be all for our day 3 training. So we hope you have gained a better understanding of the topics being discussed to us. So again po, a reminder, tomorrow we have Sir Raja Corpus, Chief Hydrologist from Maris, who will be giving us the recap for tomorrow. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Sir Mike. So we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you po.
See you all tomorrow.
Bye
Bye-bye.
everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.